Good evening, Patriots, and welcome to another live broadcast of the Douglas Ducote Show. You got many places you can be tonight. You chose to be here with me, and for that, I'm forever grateful. Thank you very, very much. Well, have you been watching what's going on college campuses across this country? Look, there's two things here. Number one, it's good to see these little snot-nosed liberals being arrested. But at the second part of this is that depending on which state they're in, whether or not they're going to actually charges stick, whether or not they're going to be released right outside the back door just a few minutes after being booked. And that's pretty damn sad and pathetic. You know, you think about what happened on January 6th and how the Department of Justice, the FBI, treated all those that were in Washington, D.C. and are still going after those, even those that didn't even go in the Capitol or that went in the Capitol that didn't do anything wrong, just followed the crowd. And then we have this bullshit. Palestinian protesters storming inside the Capitol, waving their flags of Palestine and chanting death to America and death to Israel. And nothing is being done because they leave when they're told to. But yet on these college campuses all across America, they're taking over buildings and building encampments, and then law enforcement comes in and they battle and fight against them. It's the bottom line is, if you don't hold people accountable for their illegal actions, they're only going to keep doing it. And it's just going to get worse. And sadly, it's spiraling out of control. And now, one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is how the worst of the worst is now speaking up in support of these little radical terrorists. And that's what they are. Iranian professor gave an interview yesterday, and he said that Iran likes seeing protests on U.S. college campuses, adding that those are their supporters if there's ever a conflict between Iran and America, meaning if we go to war with Iran, which could happen in any day now. Professor Fouad Izda, who, according to the University of Southern California Center of Public Democracy, earned his master's degree from the University of Houston, Texas, was in a video that was published and it was shown all over social media, interviewed about the protests in the U.S. Sooner or later, this kind of support for the Zionist regime by the American regime will diminish. It might not stop completely, but its diminishing is important, he said in the video. This is why the demonstrators on U.S. campuses are important. Isaac spoke as a member of the Islamic Republic and oftentimes said we're referring to him and the Republic. We're watching the demonstrations, and I like what we see, but it should not end with this, he said. If not for the Islamic Republic, the case of the Palestinian idea would have been closed years ago. The idea of resistance belongs to Iran, but on the operational level, when it comes to recruiting connections and building networks, the Iranian state has not been involved in significant level, he said. Bullshit. These American students, he said, are our people. He continued, if tensions between America and Iran rise tomorrow or the day after, and we go to war, these are the people who will have to take to the streets in America and support Iran. He said there are Hezbollah-style groups already in the United States that are much larger than those even in Lebanon. America is the great Satan and our main enemy. But we have hope in these areas, he said. Iran expert and foreign desk editor-in-chief Lisa Dafrahi provided insight on his comments. She said, quite rich to see the same regime that is fixated on torturing, raping, blinding, executing its own college students is applauding the ignorant college students on American campuses, she said. It speaks to their focus on growing their influence outside of Iran. She explained that Iran has been beefing up terror proxies in the region and paying their way into American universities. But at the same time, she said, the Iranian people have suffered under the rule of the barbaric leaders. After watching the comments, she said it was interesting to hear him say they have more Hezbollah followers in the U.S. than in Lebanon. Regardless of when these pro-Hamas protesters quiet down here in the U.S., it's apparent the regime has its sight set on manipulating this momentum to launch more attacks here in the West, she said. The question remains, will they focus on a physical attack or just information war, or both? And we already know, because of Joe Biden's open border policy, Border Patrol has already told us many, many times, and I've reported it right here on this show many, many times, that they are catching people coming across our southern border that are here to commit terrorist acts. They're on the no-fly zone list. They can't get into America any other way. So they go into Central and South America and Mexico, and they come up with those groups of people that are infiltrating our country. Terrorists. People on the terrorist no-fly list. We know that Director Wray of the FBI has said many times in front of Congress, just in the past few months, that they know for a fact, hands down, their Islamic terrorists have made it into America. And it's not if they will strike us, it's when they will strike us. And now they're influencing our young minds in our universities. And that's pretty sad. Where is Joe Biden on this? Why have we not heard from the President of the United States stand up to the podium and condemn this atrocity in a massive way? Well, it's because he's not a leader. He's a pathetic coward. He doesn't know shit about being a leader. He can't stand up on his own because he doesn't have a backbone or a spine. Left-wing and conservative protesters at the University of Alabama united yesterday to express their disapproval of President Joe Biden. That's right. These pro-Hamas Palestine protesters and pro-Israel American protesters came together on one single thread that they had in common. Protesters who had gathered to voice their support for opposing sides in the conflict between Israel and Hamas terrorist organizations temporarily set aside their differences to repeatedly chant, "Fuck Joe Biden." Maven Naro, an editor of the University of Alabama's school paper, The Crimson White, shared a video of the unified chants. Shortly after 5:30 p.m. Central Time, pro-Palestinian protesters and pro-Israeli protesters at the University of Alabama Student Center Plaza joined together chanting against the President of the United States. The video shows pro-Palestinian protesters waving Palestinian flags and chanting, "Fuck Joe Biden." And pro-Palestinian protesters started chanting the exact same thing, "Fuck Joe Biden." The video of Wednesday's protest quickly went viral on social media with more than 16 million views on X, formerly Twitter, in less than 24 hours. According to the Crimson White, Wednesday's pro-Palestinian protest was organized by the University of Alabama's leftist collective. The student organization demanded that the university cut all ties with Lockheed Martin, stop using Defense Department funds to conduct research, rename a university hall that was named after a former CEO of Lockheed Martin, disclose any investments made with the university's endowment fund, and publicly call for the ceasefire in Gaza. In a press release obtained by WVTM 13, the protest leader said, "As students of the University of Alabama, we can no longer stand by in silent complicity as our institution funds and state-sponsored massacre happens to Palestinians." The press release claimed that the University of Alabama received $10.4 million in Defense Department funding in 2022, and that the university has a very close relationship with Lockheed Martin. Pro-Palestinian protesters also claimed that the defense contractor has provided Israel with a variety of weapons that are being used to slaughter Palestinians. Wednesday's protest at the University of Alabama comes as pro-Palestinian protesters have formed encampments at multiple universities all across the United States of America. Who else besides Iran you think is playing into this nonsense? How about China? Playing a significant role in the anti-Israel protests by using TikTok to foment division on college campuses. Gordon Chang, a senior fellow at the Gaston Institute and vocal critic of the Communist Party of China, said the anniversary's actions are an act of war as it issues the quotidian algorithm of TikTok to instigate protesters. We know of the Hamas videos on the platform, TikTok. 96.5% of them support the terrorist group. And this echoes what China did back in 2020. Chang said, in 2020, an intelligence unit of the People's Liberation Army went to the now closed Houston consulate. They used the big data to identify Americans likely to participate in Antifa and Black Lives Matter protests. And then they sent them tailor-made videos on TikTok on how to riot. In recent weeks, anti-Israeli protests have been taking place on America's most prestigious universities as students show their solidarity with Palestinian people and the ongoing war in the Middle East. Due to the lackluster response from the university officials to curb the escalating issues, some of the protests have grown unruly, resulting in canceled classes as well as leaving Jewish students fearful for their lives. China did it back in 2020 and are now doing it again. It's doing it now, Chang stressed as he reacted to the science unraveling on campuses. The Reuters LPSOS poll found that 58% of Americans believe the Chinese government uses TikTok to influence America's public opinion. Critics of the popular social media app urge that it is a gateway to Chinese surveillance and leaves U.S. national security and Americans vulnerable. I think President Biden has a constitutional obligation to ban the app right away because of what is happening, the experts stressed. Back in March, just a few months ago, the House passed a bipartisan bill that could pave the way for TikTok to be banned. The app would no longer be accessible in the United States app stores. And that is because our FBI, our military, our CIA have all said that the company that currently owns TikTok is at the mercy of doing whatever the Chinese Communist Party tell them to do. If they tell them something isn't allowed on their platform, they don't allow it. If they tell them they want them to push something or a narrative for the Chinese party, then they do it. So the bill that was passed in March by Congress says that they have X amount of months, and I forget what it was. I can go back and figure that out, but they gave them so many months to sell the company to a company that is not affiliated in any way, shape, or form, or that has to fall under the restraints of the Chinese Communist Party. And then that would be the only way the app would be allowed here in America. So if they don't do that, then it will be stripped. Let's talk about Donald Trump for a little bit. A witness in the New York versus Trump case in Manhattan testified that former Trump attorney Michael Cohen wanted a job in the 45th president's administration, despite previously denying wanting a job role at the White House during congressional testimony. Keith Davidson, an attorney who represented former pornographic actress Stormy Daniels and former Playboy model Karen McDougal, continued testimony before the court today when he said that Cohen had been hopeful that he would land a position at the White House as chief of staff or attorney general in the lead up to Trump's inauguration. Davison also recounted that Cohen had been upset he was not going to Washington following Trump's win in 2016. Can you fucking believe it? I'm not going to Washington after everything I've done for that guy. I can't believe I'm not going to Washington. I've saved his ass. Davison recounted a conversation he had with a disappointed and saddened Michael Cohen back in December following the 2016 election. Davison testified that Cohen had called him while shopping in a California store that was decorated with Alice in Wonderland type theme. The New York versus Trump case focuses on Cohen paying Daniels $130,000 to allegedly quiet her claims of an alleged extramarital affair she had with Trump in 2006, which Trump has denied. And oh, by the way, so did Stormy Daniels. But now that she can make money from book sales and from television appearances, oh, she changed her tune. Cohen, laminated to Davison in December, called that he had not yet reimbursed for the sum he had paid Daniels. According to Davison's testimony, prosecutors alleged the Trump organization reimbursed Cohen and fraudulently logged the payments as legal expenses. Prosecutors are working to prove that Trump falsified records with the intent to commit or conceal a second crime, which would then be a felony in violation of New York's law called conspiracy to promote or prevent election. Which the last day, what that little law was written for, and the last time it was used was against the KKK when they were relevant. Trump has pleaded not guilty to 34 counts of falsifying business records. Davison's testimony that Cohen sought a White House job stands in stark contrast to what the former Trump attorney told Congress back in 2019. Sir, I was extremely proud to be the personal attorney of the President of the United States of America. I did not want to go to the White House. I was offered jobs, Cohen told Representative Jim Jordan, Republican Ohio, in the 2019 House Oversight Committee hearing. I can tell you a story of Mr. Trump reaming out Rennis Priebus because I had not taken a job with Mr. Trump wanted me to, which is working with Don McGahn at the White House General Counsel's office, he continued. What I said at the time, and I brought a lawyer in who produced a memo as to why I should not go in, because there'd be no attorney-client privilege, he said. And in order to handle some of the matters that I talked about in my opening, that it would be best suited for me not to go in, and that every president had a personal attorney. I did not want to go to the White House. Cohen added later in his testimony to Congress, I bought an attorney in, and I sat with Mr. Trump, with him for well over an hour, explaining the importance of having a personal attorney, that every president has had one in order to handle matters like the matters I was dealing with. Cohen's comments came after he pleaded guilty to 5 counts of willful tax evasion, 1 count of making false statements to a bank, 1 count of causing an unlawful campaign contribution, and 1 count of making an excessive campaign contribution in 2018. He again pleaded guilty in November of that same year to lying to Congress about testimony regarding the work he had done on a project to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. Cohen was sentenced to 3 years in prison and has since been released because of COVID-19. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Turner and House Republican Conference Chair Ellis Stapleton are currently demanding the Justice Department investigate Cohen. They allege that he committed perjury and knowingly made false statements while testifying before Congress in 2019. Turner and Stinkville argued that Cohen is being used as the prosecution's star witness in the New York versus Trump case, despite his previous convictions. Trump, meanwhile, has slammed the trial as a scam and a hoax promoted by the Biden administration and led by a conflicted judge. This is a hoax. This is a judge who is conflicted, badly conflicted. I've never seen a judge so conflicted and giving us virtually no rulings. Trump said outside the courtroom on Tuesday, "I'm going to sit in the freezing cold ice box for 8 hours, 9 hours or so. They took me off the campaign trail, but the good news is my poll numbers are the highest it's ever been. So at least we're getting the word out. And everybody knows the trial is a scam. The judge should be recused and that he recuses himself immediately." And that's because the judge, as I reported on last week, not only has donated large sums of money to Democrat Party, the DNC, but also to Joe Biden himself. Oh, and it just so happens to be that the judge's daughter worked for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's campaign. What a great justice system we have here in America, right? I'm sure you've heard by now that Boeing Aircraft Company is having some very serious problems lately. Maintenance issues, design flaws, and factory issues with those that assemble the aircraft. Well, I reported recently on a Boeing whistleblower that lost his life. And guess what? A second Boeing whistleblower died Tuesday after suffering a sudden illness. The whistleblower was a former quality control auditor who claimed that Spirit Aerosystems leadership ignored manufacturing defects of the Boeing 737 MAX aircraft. According to the Seattle Times, 45-year-old Josh Dean had been healthy prior to contracting an illness about 2 weeks ago. Carl Parsons, Dean's aunt, explained that Dean was hospitalized in critical condition and had experienced trouble breathing. The Boeing whistleblower was incubated and developed MRSA bacteria infection and pneumonia. After his condition worsened, Dean was transported from Wichita, Kansas to a hospital in Oklahoma City, where his health continued to deteriorate quickly. A CT scan suggested that Dean had also experienced a stroke on top of the infections. Before his death, medical professors had considered amputating Dean's hands and feet, according to the Seattle Times. It was brutal what he went through, Parsons explained. Heartbreaking. Following Dean's death on Tuesday, Joe Burkino, a spokesperson for Spirit Airlines, said, "Our thoughts are with Josh Dean. This sudden loss has stunned news here and for his loved ones." According to the Seattle Times, Dean had previously given a deposition in a Spirit lawsuit that filed a complaint with the Federal Aviation Administration accusing Spirit of serious and gross misconduct by senior quality management of the Boeing 737 production line. The Seattle Times reported that Dean, who was fired by Spirit in April of 2023, claimed he was fired for raising safety concerns at the company. The outlet also reported that Dean was represented by the same firm that was representing Boeing whistleblower John Barnett, who was recently found dead outside of a South Carolina hotel, allegedly due to a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Dean claimed to have discovered a critical defect in Spirit's Airlines in October of 2022. He warned that mechanics had improperly drilled holes in the Boeing 737 MAX aircraft aft pressure bulkhead. Despite warning management of the issue, Dean claimed that nothing was done to address the manufacturing defects. According to the Seattle Times, Dean missed another manufacturing flaw during the same audit when the flaw was later discovered and led to a delivery pause in Boeing production plant in April of 2023. Dean was fired. Dean eventually submitted a safety complaint to the FAA, claiming that Spirit had lied to the agency about the improper drilling holes in the aft pressure bulkhead. After I was fired, Spirit Aerosystems did nothing to inform the FAA and the public, Dean wrote, according to the Seattle Times report. In November, Dean filed a whistleblower complaint at the Department of Labor, claiming that he had been wrongfully fired and warning of the gross misconduct of senior-level Spirit Airlines Aerosystems quality managers. So that is now two men that were whistleblowers about the Boeing aircraft problems that have turned up mysteriously dead. Makes one wonder if Bill and Hillary Clinton by chance sit on the board of Boeing. I don't know. We might want to look into that. U.S. State Department has issued a statement accusing the Russian military of using chemical weapons in Ukraine, violating the International Chemical Weapons Convention, CWC. The State Department has notified Congress on Wednesday that it had determined Russian forces have employed chemical weapons against Ukrainian troops. The congressional notification came in accordance with the U.S. Chemical and Biological Weapons Control and Warfare Elimination Act of 1991, known as the CBW. The Department of State has made a determination under the CBW Act that Russia has used the chemical weapon, and I'm not sure how this is pronounced, but I will spell it CHLOROPICRIN. That's the chemical weapon they used against Ukrainian forces in violation of the Chemical Weapons Act. We made this determination in addition to our assessment that Russia has used riot control agents as a method of warfare in Ukraine, also in violation of CWC. This biochemical was used as a weapon during World War I, the last time it was used. The use of such chemicals is not an isolated incident and is probably driven by Russian forces' desire to dislodge Ukrainian forces from fortified positions and achieve tactical gains on the battlefield, the State Department added. The U.S. government's conclusion follows similar Ukrainian government and media allegations. Members of Ukraine Azov units claim injuries from an unknown poisonous substance while fighting near Mariupol in April of 2022. The Pentagon called the claims deeply concerning, and then U.S. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said officials were urgently investigating the claims. This February, the Ukrainian military general staff claimed Russian forces had employed chemical weapons on 815 occasions since the start of its Ukrainian military operations 2 years prior. General Staff said at the time that it was deploying chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear reconnaissance units to collect soil and vegetation samples and munition fragments to validate their claims. The Ukrainian military had some of the chemical agents used against their troops, including CS or tear gas, a common riot control chemical. The CWC states signatory nations should not use riot control chemicals on the battlefield but does not preclude their use in law enforcement settings. In tandem with announcing its determination that Russian forces had used chemical weapons on the Ukrainian battlefield, President Joe Biden's administration has announced new rounds of targeting sanctions, including against Russian government and military research entities and contractors they allege have assisted state chemical weapons programs. Now, let me stop right there for 1 second. There's sanctions still available to put against Russia? Are you kidding me? Why? I thought when they invaded Ukraine and then we started supporting Ukraine with weapons, you threw all the sanctions that were available against them. But that was a fucking lie. Or this is a lie. Which one is it? We have seen the news on this issue. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Thursday, as always, such accusations are absurdly unfounded and not supported by anything. Said Russia remains committed to its obligations under international law. Accusations of chemical attacks have gone both ways on the Ukrainian battlefield. The Russian Ministry of Defense alleged several Russian troops deployed were hospitalized and treated positive for toxin type B, botulism, in August of 2022. At the time, the Ukrainian government suggested the poisons were a result of the Russian troops consuming expired rations. In February 2023, the Russian military said it was investigating new allegations that Ukrainian forces used chemical weapons, and the Ukrainian government again denied the charges, insisting the Russian allegations were untrue. How many billions do you think we're going to send to Ukraine before this is all done and over with? I mean, I get that we don't need Russia to take over Ukraine because they're not stopping there. All right. They have Putin's plan, as we all know now. It's been admitted by him that they want to return back to the original Soviet Union. And when the wall fell, all that stuff back during Reagan's time as president, and all this crap, all these countries split away from the former Soviet Union, he wants all those countries back. And to get them back, since they won't willfully go, oh yes, please treat us like shit, he invades them. So he won't stop at Ukraine. But I do think there's something more sinister there. Because what we don't hear about anymore, because of all the other craziness that's happening in the world, is Burisma and all the dealings that Hunter Biden had in Ukraine when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States. We know for a fact that the Ukrainian equivalent of a DA that we have here in America, district attorney, that was investigating Burisma, we know for a fact because Joe Biden said it, and all you left-wing liberal nut jobs that think I'll make shit up can watch it on any platform out there on social media, on YouTube, on Rumble, wherever you want to go to. It's there for you to see Joe Biden telling the world how proud he was of telling the Ukrainian president that the U.S. was withholding money that they had planned to give them to help their country out unless they fired that DA. And they did. Patrick T. Brown, a writer for CNN, a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and a former senior policy advisor to Congress Joint Economic Committee, expressed his views yesterday in a piece for CNN. College quads have been turned into tent cities. University buildings have been taken over by groups of students unfurling banners supporting violent Hamas, violent Palestinian protesters, and other terrorist groups chanting death to America and death to Israel. And campus protests are pockmarked with calls for violence and anti-American and anti-Israel groups across the country. This gives Republicans an easy argument to make about why voters shouldn't place Democrats in charge of our key civic institutions. The attack ads write themselves. If they keep their ivy-covered campuses safe, how can they protect you? The GOP coalition is increasingly attracting voters without a four-year degree who may have little sympathy for young people treating their time on campus as an opportunity for anti-Israel, anti-American activism rather than an education. Voters who didn't go to elite schools and see a Democrat coalition reluctant to criticize its unruly campus wings may find themselves culturally more at home with the party seen as favorable civic peace. So far, the Democrat Party hasn't risen to the political challenge of disavowing the left-wing activities and activists who could hurt them this coming fall. House Speaker Mike Johnson is one of the Republicans who senses a political opportunity. And yes, it is a political opportunity. Yesterday, he led the House on a vote on the Anti-Semitic Awareness Act. On Tuesday, he announced that House committees would investigate university policies around protecting Jewish students, including whether institutions could continue to receive federal funds if they haven't taken measures to stop the harassment. In the Senate, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has blasted students dangerous and radical politics, asking whether universities see their mission as education or congestion rising. Republican Ohio Senator J.D. Vance has renewed his push to tax the endowment of elite universities, calling higher education expensive daycare center for coddled children. Former President Donald Trump also sets political blood in the water. On Tuesday, he posted on Truth Social that President Joe Biden's voice is one that nobody has heard over a picture of police arresting students in New York. That muted voice is likely the consequences of Biden's effort to walk a political tightrope. As the head of the party that disappointingly represents college-educated voters, Israeli skeptic voices, and young people, he's trying to finesse a stance that expressed sympathy for the protesters' goal without seeming to sanction their obstruction and over-the-top rhetoric. His first statement after the protests erupted last week sought to strike a balance in criticizing both sides. I condemn the anti-Semitic protest. I also condemn those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians. But Biden's attempt balancing act is a mistake. The vivid imagery of students overrunning campus buildings proves that the White House, with a chance for a sister squash moment, positioning itself against the far left to appeal to voters in the center. For those who don't remember, Sister Sr was a rap artist who had called for violence against whites in the wake of the 1992 Rodney King riots. In his successful campaign for the White House, Bill Clinton scored political points by explicitly condemning her rhetoric before civil rights leader Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition, asking his stance with some black voters to appeal to more moderate and conservative white voters. In today's electoral climate, forceful action from the White House, on par with Johnson's legislative push, could appeal to political moderates. Non-college voters, including Hispanic voters, who've been moving away from the Democrat coalition. Progressive voters might not like it, but elections are won by appealing to the medium voter, not by exciting the base. The White House seems to be awakening to political dynamics after the takeover of Columbus University at Hampton Hall on Tuesday, the administration's rhetoric escalated. Forcibly taking over buildings is not peaceful. It is wrong, said a White House spokesperson. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona on Tuesday called the anti-Semitic rhetoric reported at Columbia protests abhorrent and said that civil rights investigations of more than 130 campuses are underway. But Biden could get more mileage by echoing Clinton and directly repugnant to the protesters' excuses backed by executive action. Words alone won't convince voters in the middle that the administration is serious about standing up to the far left. A White House meeting with Johnson to hold schools accountable for allowing anti-Semitic to fester, or meetings with Jewish students who have experienced campus hate could be beneficial. And the president should politically support administrators at schools like Columbia that have threatened to expel students who have crossed a line from protest into violence. The campus protests also provided an opening for Biden to stand more broadly against his left flank after years of towing the line, from allowing progressive voices to advance unnecessary culture war, fights like replacing the term pregnant mothers with the gender-neutral birthing people, or pushing economic policies like massive electric vehicle credits or large child care subsidies that sought to remake the American economy along left-leaning lines. The Biden team has been captive to intellectual trends on the left. Of course, opposing campus activists will not win the hearts of young people on elite campuses. In a statement released on Instagram on Tuesday, the official student arm of the Democrat National Committee supported protests on campus and criticized Biden's handling of the war in Gaza. But it is unclear whether the youthful protesters at Columbia and other elite schools represented many voters other than themselves. A recent poll of the Institution of Politics at Harvard Kennedy School found that among 18 to 29-year-olds, issues that attract a great deal of elite attention, like student loan debt and the situation in Gaza, are much less important in determining their vote than bread and butter issues like inflation, healthcare, and housing. As CNN's Zachary Wolf recently wrote, polls suggest Biden is struggling to capture the support of younger voters. Misreading their interests could be part of the story. Youth outreach focus on issues that captive college activists and recent graduates, rather than majority of Americans who don't go to a four-year college, is unlikely to woo uncommitted voters. At the same time, Republicans should be so eager to make political hay as they set the barn on fire. Videos of campus police manhandling protesters might backfire, as could statements like that of Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who signed an executive order calling for institutions to establish appropriate punishments for anti-Semitic rhetoric on college and university campuses. Anti-Jewish slogans, however hateful, are free speech. Republicans should be cracking down on language protected by the First Amendment. Republicans don't have to look far for examples of schools like the University of Chicago and the University of Florida, offering a better approach. Students are welcome to share their views, even passionate, but may not disrupt college missions of learning and developing a deeper understanding of complex issues. Supporting universities' efforts to enforce public order on campus may be the first step toward the Biden administration triangulating against its progressive flank. With November looming, that strategy, backed up by meaningful action up to and including the loss of federal funds for misbehaving institutions, will be necessary to give independent voters confidence that they're not voting for a political party whose stance are dictated by campus radicals. I love it when CNN is talking the fucking truth. And the truth hurts when it comes to what this current administration is doing. And before I go on to this next story, let me just add that once again, and I will keep saying this, if you haven't already done so, please reach out to the FBI on their Twitter account or X account, on their Facebook accounts. Send them an email. Call them. As well as the Department of Justice. Peacefully. Don't say anything stupid. It's going to have them come knocking in your door. But express your concern of why Alihan Omar, Rashid Tlaib, Anita Presley, AOC, and the squad in general are not in handcuffs. Why are they allowed to walk around with a fucking gas can pouring fuel on this already big fire? That is called inciting violence. The FBI is in all rights, covered under law in the United States, to arrest those members of Congress that are inciting violence. But yet they do not do that. Why? You pay their salary. And unless they hear from you and me, they're not going to do shit. They might not do shit anyhow, but at least Director Wray would know that we, the people, are sick and tired of seeing this two-tier justice system where you only go after conservatives and Republicans with a freaking sledgehammer and let these left-wing radical nut jobs, and as far as I'm concerned, terrorists, because in my opinion, and most veterans, 99.9% of them will tell you, they view Alihan Omar and Rashid Tlaib as just that. Terrorists that have infiltrated our United States Congress. So why are they not being held accountable? You can bet your ass that if it was reversed, all this was just switched around, it was Republican members of Congress pouring the gas on the fire, the FBI would have them under the fucking jail. But not these radicals. Nope. Not these radicals. Christians and those that have religious beliefs are under a vicious attack from this government. Forces determined to shut them out of the American healthcare system for good. Biden's Department of Health and Human Services recently struck yet another blow to Americans when it amended rules pertaining to Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act to require people of faith to fund elective abortions and transgender surgeries through their health insurance. Consequently, believers are left with no other option than to either withdraw from their insurance providers entirely or unwillingly participate in procedures that go against their held religious beliefs. But patients and insurance holders should never be forced to pay for healthcare procedures and services that violate their faith. The newly finalized Section 1557 reinterprets the definition of on the basis of sex to include gender identity and the termination of pregnancy. The rule's new definition and its requirements do not bode well for insurance holders in the United States, where more than 70% of people identify as Christian. Likewise, nearly 75% of citizens, religious and non-religious included, believe that physicians should not be allowed to opt out on performing medical procedures that go against their beliefs. And that's exactly what Section 1557 now requires from religious doctors and medical staff. Faith-based hospitals and clinics must now adhere to an ethical problematic definition of sex, the new mandate says. And doctors are required to perform gender-affirming procedures, including own children, despite their consistent medical objections. The rule's language will inflict real harm on real patients and require insurance holders to foot the bill for procedures with lifelong consequences, including elective mastectomies, hysterectomies, breast augmentation, abortions, and more. Health at Home HHS move has been a long time coming. During the Obama era, HHS prosecuted more than a faith implementing rules and regulations such as contraceptive and abortion mandates, and they relentlessly tried to force Catholics to pay for birth control in their health insurance plans without exception. Although in general, Catholics don't believe in birth control, unless you're Joe Biden's Catholic type person. Regardless, the agency's decision reeked of hypocrisy. HHS rules blatantly discriminate against religious order and people of faith by compelling them to fund abortions while at the same time prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, and age and disability. The Biden administration now shamelessly promises Americans that the HHS proposal will do nothing to stifle religious freedoms, while disingenuously claiming to actively defend First Amendment freedoms. But these promises fall short each time the administration weaponizes its nonpartisan HHS against religious Americans and paves the way for other government agencies to do the same. HHS Secretary Xavier Becerra continues to target and ignore religious freedom protections, even going so far as to abandon the case of a nurse who was legally forced to participate in an abortion. And she happened to be a Catholic nurse. Thankfully, Americans faithful have solutions at their disposal, free from problematic causes. Christian health sharing ministries and solidarity health services provide an ethical alternative to traditional health insurance. Free for all federal monetary assistance. Ministries like these provide members with high quality care at a reasonable price without compromising their held religious beliefs. In the wake of HHS new ruling, health sharing ministries stand ready to welcome millions of Americans into our fold. It's unacceptable that Section 1557 rules put Americans in a position of choosing between either their conscious, their religious beliefs, or care. But at least for now, health sharing ministries offer them a place, a refuge, where their beliefs and medical care can coexist. You ever thought you'd see the day that where we're at right now in this country? They say that it's not good to live in your past. I mean, I've heard that once, I've heard it a million times. I do. I think about the past a lot. I recently had a conversation about that with a friend of mine that, said, why do you always refer back to things back in the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, the 60s? And the only explanation I could come up with is because that's when I saw America that was better than it is now. That's when I saw America that came together in tragedies and stood up to violence and supported our military and our veterans and our law enforcement officers. That's not what we have today. What we have today is pathetic and weak and sad. And we're allowing although a small group of our society, but a loud one, to basically get away with murder. And our two-tier justice system only holding one party responsible for their actions and not the other. What I've seen so far, not just in my 62 years on earth, but as a veteran law enforcement officer myself, I'll sum it up like this. If you had two people, two humans, let's say the same age, let's say the same race, doesn't matter their race, doesn't matter their religion, and one's a Republican and one's a Democrat, and they both go out and commit a murder the exact same way. Let's say shot somebody in the head for no reason at all because they just thought it was fun. In today's justice system, that Democrat stands a better chance of getting less time in jail and walking free than that Republican ever will. That's how I see today's justice system and how it treats the two different parties. And that must stop. What I see happening all across this country is not the America that I served for, that I defended, that I went to combat for. It's not the country that I took an oath for. I don't recognize this America anymore. Now, I have hope and I have faith that what's happening is temporary. And come November, it's all going to change. But if it doesn't, I'm going to tell you right now, stick a fork in it because America's done. We can't do another 4 years of what is happening right now. Those Democrats in charge of this country right now have us on a train derailment from hell. And they're laughing all the way down. And it's not good. Folks, you had many places to be tonight. You chose to be here with me, and for that, I am forever grateful. Thank you very, very much. If you haven't already done so, please like the show, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends and family about us, wherever you're seeing us tonight, whether it's on YouTube or Rumble or LinkedIn or X, formerly Twitter. We go out live on all those platforms, or at the Douglas Ducote Show, or Douglas Ducote website, DouglasDucote.com. In the description of this and all my videos and all my shows, you can see the places you can follow me on social media platforms. Follow me there, I'll follow you back. That's how we spread this message and get it out there, especially as we're approaching November. Whatever you're doing tonight or whatever you're doing this weekend, please be safe. Please tell your family how much you appreciate and love them. Please watch over them and watch over your six, because it's not a matter of if we have another major 9/11 type event in America. It's when, because it's going to happen, because this administration has allowed it to happen. As always, please say a prayer for our men and women serving the United States military, our veterans, our law enforcement officers, our first responders and their families, our angel families, our blue and gold star families, and our country. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless each and every one of you. Take care, and I'll see you back here next week on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central for another live broadcast. Take care.